Ցավ։ Ավերվածություն։ Մարդկային կորուստներ. Do these words tell you anything? Most probably not, because they are in Armenian and they mean pain, destruction, human losses. Altogether, they describe a war. Before I start my speech, let me share my personal story with all of you. Last year, I moved to Lithuania to pursue my second bachelor's degree and to make the changes in my life that I always wanted to. However, the first 3 months were particularly tough. My country, Armenia, was going through a full-scale war. Now, when I remember, it's interesting because, on one hand, I used to do my homework and quizzes for political science, arts and culture, and other subjects. And on the other hand, I just kept refreshing the news website, seeing more and more destruction in my homeland, seeing my friends dying there. It was the moment that made me think that the small nations are in the trap of great powers, having their citizens as a collateral damage in between. A year ago, I wouldn't even think that I will be on this stage. And using this chance and echoing my gratitude to be here, I want to inform you about the region of South Caucasus. I want to tell you about Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, the military conflict there, what we have nowadays, and why it is important. Okay. If I tell you Armenia, how many of you know where that country is on the map? Some of you, but not all of you. Armenians are said to have had their presence in the Armenian highlands for over 4,000 years. Armenia is also the first officially Christian state. I also mentioned Nagorno-Karabakh earlier. It's a landlocked region in South Caucasus. American historian Robert Hewson claims that Armenians have had their presence since the 2nd, or possibly even earlier, since the 4th century BC. However, the modern-day conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh has its roots in the decisions made by Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union from 1924 to 1953. Back then, after the Sovietization of both Armenia and Azerbaijan, Kavbureau, which was supervising the relations of South Caucasus region, and the Russian Communist Party decided that Nagorno-Karabakh would stay Azerbaijan's Soviet Republic territory, with broad regional. Over time, Armenians demanded independence in the region so as to be able to realize one of the basic rights a nation can have, the right for self-determination. Azerbaijanis, on the other hand, claimed that Armenians do not need independence in order to realize themselves socially, culturally, or in the aspect of religion. Further on, there were demonstrations both in Nagorno-Karabakh and in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. Later, there were clashes between Armenians and Azerbaijani people, both in Armenia and in Azerbaijan. The events took a broader swing, and the United Nations Refugee Agency reports that in January 1990, an Armenian man attacked 2 Azerbaijani people in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. The response to the attack was quick but bloody, when Azeri mobs killed 34 Armenians in Baku. Everything ended up with a war in the 90s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when later on, Russia was brokering a ceasefire. This was followed by a relatively calm period for over 2 decades, when the tensions between the sides sprang up again. It led to the war, to the peak of the conflict in September 2020, when the 44-day war burned out, having devastating consequences for all sides in terms of human losses. Well, this might create an impression among you all that people from these 2 nationalities have always been full of hatred towards each other, right? No. No. So many Armenians used to live in Azerbaijan, and many Azerbaijani people used to live in Armenia. They had their homes, they led their usual lives. They didn't even seem to have major issues or disagreements. It was something not far from reality. Moreover, as Rauf Karagozov, Azerbaijani by nationality from Uppsala University, would mention, the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh does not have its roots in ancient hatred. Armenians and Azerbaijani people used to live together side by side peacefully until the end of the 19th century. Generally, this is not the only conflict of this kind. Remember Cyprus and the Turks, Northern Ireland, Kosovo, Palestine, the Kashmir conflict. But if you look closer, you might notice one significant difference between all those conflicts and the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. The attitude and the reaction of international society to the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. More specifically, the indifference. You might ask me, why on earth do I have to care about a conflict which is literally thousands of miles away from my home, from my country, from my city? It does not even concern me. Well, I have to disappoint you. It can concern anyone, anywhere, and at any time point. And the truth is, if you don't have oil, if there is no crucial danger of nuclear war, the international society that we like so much will just moderately stay aside. They will stay aside. More, what they will do is to give you recommendations and resolutions to stop the military actions, to be peaceful. Do you really think that as soon as the mercenaries hear that, they will stop shooting, bombing, torturing, and cutting people alive? You might ask me, but why are there even wars if we do not want them? It's simple. One of the most prominent American realists, John Mearsheimer, would mention in his work, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, that the nations, the countries, are rational actors and they pursue their primary goal, which is survival. This simply means that the countries will seek for more and more power in order to survive. Moreover, the great powers have certain objectives, and one of those is to be a regional hegemon. Having said this, it's not surprising to see Turkey's and Russia's vested interest in the military conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey has always had the narrative of establishing a land connection through Armenia to the Turkic world on the east, representing the ideology of pan-Turkism. On the other hand, Russia wants to balance the situation, be the regional hegemon, and keep the countries under its influence. And hear me out on this one. This is the point where everything gets messed up. Small nations can be used by great powers, becoming pawns in their hands. They will get certain benefits, probably, but they will have become political tools, geographical puppets. And what's left after? Just to live in an illusion. Illusion that you have independence, sovereignty, and power in your own country, whereas practically you do not decide anything. You don't have a choice, you don't have a voice. Is it a failed state then? Do great powers deliberately fail the other states to have more influence over them? How fair is that? Can be used to trigger wars, to commit the actions that the great powers would never commit themselves otherwise. And you ask me why there are wars? Well, yeah, I have to admit it, that it really happens when a random dude wakes up and decides to start a war. Like it happened in the case of the Mexicans and the French in the 19th century over a pastry shop. But it's not the case in my speech. Why am I telling you all this? And why all nations? Small nations like Armenians have always had to deal with their problems on their own. We did not have oil, we did not have much money, not even a sea. Nah, not interesting for the international society. That's it. Deal with your problems on your own then. I know this might sound harsh or traumatic, but that's the reality. It's already an unconscious action to search for danger in everything. You might ask me why. Because Armenians do not want another ethnical cleansing of over 1.5 million people, known as Metz-Yagern, which is also recognized by the current US President Joe Biden. Because Armenians cannot afford another war. They simply cannot. They cannot afford losing over 4,000 boys and men in a war. Several of them, well, they died. As military service for 2 years is compulsory for all males as soon as they turn 18. I simply do not want to see again the faces of mothers and sisters totally devastated and left without life in them. Because it hurts. A lot. I'm telling you all this because I want you to pay attention to the process of global peace building, which we lack so much, in which we all fail so badly. And in terms of global peace building, I want to mention one very important factor: the courage for recognition. Let's just imagine, what if the world leaders were able to recognize their own faults? Like the Serbian president did in 2013, recognizing and apologizing for the events committed by the Serbian people after the breakup of Yugoslavia, including the Srebrenica events, where 8,000 Bosniak Muslim men were killed. Having the courage to recognize the mistakes of the past will contribute greatly for a more constructive present and future. Okay, let's stop for a second. Do you see how deeply this goes? This is almost the end of my speech, and ideally, I'm supposed to give you beautiful and powerful resolutions to all the problems that I have mentioned so far, right? I haven't you, because I don't know any solution to this. I don't know how to make this work. I have been studying international law, and currently I'm studying international relations, and I cannot see anything practically working. Me, what kind of governmental regimes haven't we had? What kind of weapons haven't we used? What kind of negotiations haven't we had? What haven't we done so far? And this is the case where I need your help. I want us to do better. We have to be more responsible, more conscious, and more mindful about the actions going on around us. Because it's said that currently we live in the safest era of modern history. I don't know about you, but this is not how I see the safest era of modern history. As Thomas Paine would say, tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Thank you.